we have a quorum. Welcome back to the Senate Judiciary Committee hearing. Today will be our final hearing prior to crossover day. We are coming back with two bills on the agenda just for informational purposes. Senate Bill 151 will not be heard. So today we just have Senate Bill 226 on the agenda. Let's start by opening it up with a word of prayer, and we'll recognize Senator Rhett to open us up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, y'all. Let's bow our heads. Oh, Lord, we thank you for this day, another day to do the people's work. We ask that you guide us, heart, mind, and soul, with your wisdom so that we can move forward and help all the people who depend on us up here in the Georgia Senate. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Thank you. All right, we took testimony yesterday on Senate Bill 226, but we do have a new sub that's been given to us that does go a little different direction on the bill. And so I'd like to call up Senator Anna Vitarte, and we have a sign-up sheet. If you want to be heard on this bill, especially since there's a new substitute, we'll take testimony. And so if you want to be heard, please sign up so I can make sure I don't miss you. The LC I have, Senator, is 490497S. Is that correct? That's correct. Okay. Does everybody have that substitute? All right, you may move forward.
So I'm gonna be relatively brief, but this sub we bring you today does make some substantial changes to the original bill we brought to you yesterday. Basically moves the issue of obscene material in school libraries and in our schools under the code section related to Title 20 with the Department of Education, and basically in a nutshell creates a appeals process for parents to basically file complaints to their local Board of Education and principals and go through an appellate process in creating the school district's creating a model policy for these issues to be handled and codifying that. It also asked that later this year the Department of Education put together a model policy for all 180 school districts around this in terms of how to determine whether material is harmful to minors and work with local school districts in terms of its adoption at the local level. So basically in a nutshell, that's what the bill does. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I want to commend you and everybody that was involved in working on this. We do have some folks who want to be heard I'll call on. But a bill like this, I think there was a lot of concern about the original draft, and instead of just trusting it would be heard on the floor or get through the House or even get the committee vote, you guys decided to all get together and try to reach a compromise. I think, in my opinion, anybody that heard the testimony or that actually looks at what's been presented to us as happening right now would want something to happen to make sure there is a process in place. And waiting another year on this, I don't think was a good move. And so I want to commend you for bringing folks together to start this process and get a bill that we can get out this year and see if we can make a difference. And so I appreciate your work. Does anybody have any questions? Oh, sorry.
No, just to make one comment to that, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you saying that. I mean, this is not the ideal bill. I think this bill should still be stronger. But I think at the end of the day, I think from our vantage point, I think in terms of creating an opportunity for parents to have a place in a vehicle to make sure that these complaints are heard, but also my concern, just again, going back to being a local board member, and I've shared this with some of the school districts, is there needs to be some sort of transparency and make sure that the citizens and our local school boards are engaged when these issues come up. But I do want to thank the local school districts and the Department of Education for, quite frankly, staying up all night working on this. And early this morning, I think George sent me an email at 5 a.m. or something crazy. But just everybody who was involved, just having this very difficult discussion, and it's very complex. Thank you.
Thank you. We have some questions from the committee for you. Senator, if you want to stay up there.
Yep.
Senator Watson.
Yeah, just maybe I'm wrong, but line 40, should determination be determined? That's, and just reading through this, I could be wrong, but it should be. We're all on the same page there. Yeah. Okay.
So line 40, the word determination should be determined. It's good we have some non-lawyers on here. I'm sure, I don't know how many lawyers have read this.
You know, my mother was
and
an
not one
English
caught
teacher.
it. Your mom was
My mother was a teacher. My
Oh,
wife
teacher.
is a teacher. My
Well, I
sisters
would
are
only,
teachers.
I only expect this bill to get lawyered up while we're here, so.
This is being teachered up.
teachered up.
Thank you, Senator.
At the appropriate time, we will take an amendment on that then. Question from Senator Parent.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator. I have a couple questions.
Yes, ma'am.
On most of the bill, you have the school principal making a decision. On line 50, it says the local school superintendent's decision. I think that's in conflict with the rest of the bill. That's one question I have. And
If
I
you-
have two other brief questions.
You made a look at lines 47 through 49. There's a process where it goes from the principal to the superintendent, and that's what that's referring back to.
So the school principal determination, local school superintendent, oh, I see, okay, I thought that was local school board. So I read that wrong. Okay, thank you. And
So
then,
basi-
so,
yeah.
the other question I have is, so you have made it the principal with a review process up to the superintendent. I guess the question I have is, if materials, it would seem that a lot of materials are not going to be limited to one school. So, and maybe I'm wrong. That's my question. Like,
No, it's a good question. So I think the intent where we're going with this is that when this bill passes, the Department of Education is going to create a model policy on how to basically address these issues. So from the top down and bottom up, there should be a universal policy in terms of how the material is addressed in an entire school system. And if somebody wants to correct me, they can. But that's my understanding.
well, follow up to that, if that's the intent, which I actually think is a good idea, I'm not sure it's good to.
Because I don't think we can cherry pick like one school to the.
Well, I
if
don't
that's
think you
where you're
can,
going,
and in
right.
which case, I think the rest of the bill then is probably overly prescriptive, because if you're gonna have because I agree with 50 section C, if you're gonna have that policy, which would be better, then the rest of it, you're dictating stuff that might not be a good idea once they can formulate their policy, especially given that we have agreement that it's really going to be more of a system-wide problem than like an individual school.
But I think-
Same thing?
I do and I don't. I mean, I think the sections before 53, I think, is to ensure that there is still an element of local control, I think, as it relates to this. So, I mean, there's some rules that the state will push down, and policy-wise that school districts will have to adopt. But I think in terms of how these complaints come in and how they're addressed, that's kind of what the intention with Section 1 is.
Well, I'm certain that the proponents are interested in laying this out in law. I just think that we then create a conflict with C. But moving on, if I can ask one more question.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, Senator.
I'm a little concerned and about the timeframes laid out. Within 7 days, blah, blah, blah. We have to get them an answer. And so,
Which line are you looking at specifically?
like line 34, within 7 days of receiving such complaint, the principal or designee shall review. I think it might be on then on line 42, within 10 days. So those might be reasonable. I guess my question is, have you received input that those would be reasonable timeframes? Like I don't want it to be like, oh, this complaint supersedes everything else that the school
I mean, just
principal
based on
has to do.
No, that's fair, Senator. I mean, just based on my experience of being a school board member and working with our principals on complaints, whether they're, somebody wants to consider them less serious than others. I mean, usually the principals and the superintendent act within probably even less than 7 days in most situations. So I think 7-10 days is pretty reasonable.
And the school systems, I take it, must have agreed.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. No, no more right now, Mr. Chairman.
On that note, can you confirm that the public schools that were working with you have signed off on this version of the bill?
They have.
Okay. Is anything to be said contrary to that?
I think,
Okay.
yeah, the only question or discussion we've had, and I've had with Mr. Colston, was their concerns between line 50 and 52 about section 1160 in terms of, and I don't know if you want, I'll let him kind of speak to his position on it. I don't have an issue with this section and being in there because I think there needs to be some level of school board involvement to be
Yeah, I
connected
agree.
to the citizens. I know he has kind of a little bit different position on that. I'll let him
Okay.
speak to it if he wants to.
You want to, let's
Or
hear
just
from
wait.
him first.
Sorry. It's your meeting, sir.
All right, before you come up, let's finish if you don't mind, let's hear from you next. Let's finish the questions from the committee for the author. Senator Kirkpatrick.
Yeah, my question related to the time frame, line 34, and sometimes I've got another bill where the number of days is an issue, and I'm just wondering about business days versus calendar days. Might clear that up.
Okay. I'm open to an amendment if you have one.
Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, I had a question about, I guess, really one of process. And as I understand paragraphs 6, 7, and 8 on page 3, so the principal makes a decision, and that is subject to review by the superintendent, and that's the word used on line 48, shall be subject to timely administrative review by the local board. And then the same verbiage in lines 50, 51, and 52, that the superintendent's decision shall be subject to review by the local board of education. And I'm just wondering if the word review sufficiently describes what I think you're trying to do. I think it is that the superintendent reviews the principal's decision and has the authority to overturn, to change, to render a different decision on appeal, if you will. And similarly, that the board can review and overturn or change the decision of the superintendent. I'm not sure. Welcome to Judy. This is what.
Oh, I knew this coming in here.
And so I'm just not sure that review gives the real authority at an appellate level to then flip the decision that's being reviewed. I would open that, I guess, to the board for discussion. If I'm the only one worried about that, then maybe move on.
The only comment I would make is that the way he set his bill up, it starts off requiring the State Department to come up with a model process. And so I don't disagree with you. It doesn't say what review is, but I think his intent is there'll be a model process set up that then will be adopted following this guideline. So that will be defined hopefully by the department of what that review looks like, what that exactly means. Is that a nice way of putting it?
My understanding of this is just like any other policy that DOE hands down to a school district, at some level, once that rule is created or policy is created for the school districts to adopt, the school board is going to have to adopt those rules. And I think in some situations where, and I know we have in Paulding County, have sometimes amended or changed those rules, but trying to stay as consistent as possible with the department.
Do you have more thoughts on that, Senator Kennedy?
No, Senator Hatchett was just pointing out line 52, section OCGA 20-2-1160. That may prescribe a process that sort of answers my question. I don't know what that code section does.
Yeah, I'm going to let Mr. Cosley has a comment to that.
Before he steps up, any other questions from the committee for the author? Senator,
I already kind of touched on this.
let me get your mic on. Senator
Thank
Parent.
you. Thank you. But just tossing it out there. So we have it on line 25 that the local boards need to adopt the complaint resolution policy for its school system by August 1st. And on line 53, we have a month before that, the DOE is supposed to promulgate the model policy. I just don't really know what sense it makes to be, they need to work more in in concert. Like, so if anything, we should delay it a couple more months so that they can see what happens, what DOE comes out with. Otherwise, it's kind of, you're just having people working at what could end up being not synchronized procedures.
Yeah, I mean, hold on, give me 1 second, sir. I mean, I'm open to pushing it out another 30 days, but I think this should be ample time to get this done.
Yeah, but just from like a practical.
No, that's fair.
Time. That way, there's not duplication of efforts.
I think the thing we're trying to do is just try and get this implemented as soon as we can, closest to when school starts for most districts.
Yeah,
I know
that makes sense.
Like our district, we typically start August 1st, many districts in West Metro, West Georgia, North Georgia. I think that's kind of where we came out from that perspective.
Any additional questions for the author? Who do you want to call up next? Did you have,
Well, while we're on 1160, I'll let Buddy come up here.
you want to come back up?
Just make a comment on that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members, Senator Anavitarte. My name is Robert Costley, and I'm the Executive Director of the Georgia Association of Educational Leaders. First of all, we want to commend the Senator for his collaboration with multiple stakeholders late into the evening and early in the morning. He's been extremely collaborative and open to kind of the concerns that we bring. One of the things that we brought to on the 1160 is the practicality of application. And what we ask you to envision is how this would actually be functioning in a year. Because of this, the Tribunal Law of Boards of Education, 1160, I expressed a practical concern with the senator this morning that there were some parents that are going to interpret that law to believe that they can have a live hearing or a trial perhaps on an individual book, which is not exactly the case. I mean, a board could review documents from the principal, et cetera. The concern is that if in a county of school boards where there are many schools, if there were multiple complaints, it might become impractical if parents were expecting boards to hold kind of a trial on a book or a trial on a movie. We certainly agree that parents should have an appeal process or should have a way to voice a concern about content regarding their children. And we believe most schools are handling that extremely well. It's the exceptions that are causing the problem, and which is why we're here today. The other part of 1160 is it provides for an appeal to the State Board of Education. And this is the practical concern that we brought to the Senator, and I'll be brief on this. It is not immediately clear what the State Board would be ruling on. If you would be expecting the State Board to rule whether the local system followed its policy correctly, that's probably easier to handle. If they erred from their own policy, it's an easy overturn. If the State Board is going to be expected by the citizens of Georgia to rule on whether, quote, The Handmaid's Tale, for instance, is an objectionable book, I don't know how the State Board, what basis the State Board would make that assertion. We would be putting the State Board of Education in a position where they're having to rule on whether a specific title, movie, or recording is appropriate on its own merit. And I don't know that they would be qualified to make that decision as a tribunal. The other practical problem with that is if the State Board would be forced to rule whether The Handmaid's Tale is an appropriate book for Georgia, if they think of the thousands of contestable titles, the potential there, the State Board would have no way to do that because in order to adequately rule on it, they have to read the book. They have to get the context. They have to do the research, which points to the timeline issue. If a principal were going to rule on this, are we expecting the principal to read the novel in order to make the decision? So to close on this is that we ask, the reason that timeline is necessary is if we rush that policy and we're not clear on what we're asking the State Board to govern, we fear that we'll be back here next year. We're trying to fix something because it's not working. So I'll be glad to take any questions. I just appreciate again the Senator's willingness to collaborate on the bill.
Anybody have any questions? I do think it's a legitimate point. I'm just reading 20-2-1160, and if there's a decision that is appealed at the local level, and I like the idea of having the ability to appeal this from a principal and having the board, in essence, look at it. But I do think it's a legit question of what the appeal looks like if it goes from there to the state board. Are they looking at whether or not the process was followed or the merits? And I don't know if you have any, if you have any comment, and I'll invite any people to speak on the bill that worked on this, what your intent is. Do you want to have the state board making those decisions, or do we want this to stay at the local level?
I mean, I would argue that in so many other cases in our school districts, I mean, there are avenues that will reach some sort of final determination by the state. So I think just in terms of having a higher court either dismiss it, not hear it, I say court, but the state board either hear it, dismiss it, not hear it, based on the grounds of what the local districts have done. I mean, as I told Mr. Costley, I mean, I support what's in the bill. If y'all want to lawyer it up and change it, I mean, I'll leave that up to y'all. I just think as I've communicated with the school districts, I think we've come a long way in terms of kind of giving up kind of the direction we've been going. So I don't know if on that amendment, unless the committee decides to do so, I would back off of it, Mr. Chairman.
Well, and I will say, just in the people I've talked to about the bill, and talking to a local school district, a very large school district, they currently have an appeal process in place and have not had a large number of appeals. They said there's 1 or 2 a year on average. And so I don't think it's something that will overwhelm the state department or the state board based on just that one conversation. But I've not heard of a lot of these things coming up right now on appeal locally in this districts that do have a process like this in place. Yeah. Any other questions from the committee before we start taking witnesses?
I'll just make the comment. I think I can speak for my own county school district, having seen these issues before, having 30,000 kids, 12th largest in the state. I don't see this becoming an overburdensome issue for the State Department.
Any more questions for the author before we start taking witnesses? All right, we have Cole Muzio, the Family Policy Alliance of Georgia.
Yeah, thank you, and I appreciate you taking comment because this is a different bill than what we looked at yesterday. And I appreciate the senator for his work on this. I think when I brought this legislation to him, it crossed out one word, and it certainly has become a twisting and turning and complicated sort of process. And he has been very collaborative and good at working through this process. It's been a frustrating one because, as Mr. Chairman, you pointed out, at the start of this, everyone heard yesterday the egregiousness of what we're dealing with and the urgency. And I think this bill is a first step that I think is worth taking, and that's why I'm supporting this bill. I think it's a very small step towards that process, and that's why I support it with some hesitancy. But for me, the big thing here that I'm excited about, and I'm sad to hear some concern about timelines, is what this bill has turned into is it's gone from we don't believe libraries is a safe place for kids to see obscene materials, which I hope we all agree. It's turned into what really is a parental right to be heard bill, and I still think that's important. So these 7 days, 10 days, 14 days, this guaranteed process for a parent, as we heard from some parents yesterday, to have their complaints heard, to be addressed. I'm not sure that they'll be addressed satisfactorily, and I think we'll be back here in the future to address some of this stuff. But the right for a parent to be heard, I think, is imperative. And so as you weigh different amendments and look at this bill, that to me is the key piece of this. In a timely manner, in a written manner, in a documented manner, in a clear manner, parents that are seeing obscene materials come home with their kids and that they're being made aware of, their ability to have that heard, addressed, and dealt with, I think, is imperative. So thank y'all for dealing with this. Mr. Chairman, I know you've been involved in a lot of these conversations. I appreciate your feedback, and thanks for everybody that's worked on this and provided, this is a big issue. And so we support this bill with some hesitancy, but I appreciate this step forward. Thanks.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Muzio? All right, thank you. Noel Kahayan? Ms. Noel? There you go.
Good morning. I also want to say that I really appreciate this process. I didn't know how difficult it would be. I also appreciate everyone's hard work, especially the senator's hard work and patience. We need a process that is not onerous or intimidating to parents. We need a process that does not ostracize and embarrass our students. These are not one-off occurrences of sexualization in our school libraries. Every school district is exhibiting obscene materials to minors, especially through EBSCO. Kids are just being silent about them. So yes, a process to protect kids should require the book to be read before it is even offered to our children. I don't think that is too much to ask. Bottom line, our students are not protected from obscene materials because of 16-12-104, which is the obscenity exemption for libraries, because it is still intact. However, I do support this bill because it is a tiny step in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? All right, thank you. We have Virginia Galloway with the Faith and Freedom Coalition.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief. We will support this bill because, again, it's a step in the right direction. I am very concerned that EBSCO has no accountability here in this bill. And also, I was very dismayed to hear last night that a school librarian had actually been arrested for child pornography all over his computer, 1,500 images of children. And, you know, I know that's not exempt from the law, but I'm concerned about what a person like that might have been given those children in that school, and that he would have been exempt for what he gave of library materials or what he promoted. So I just want to leave that with the committee to ponder on, but say that I'm glad that we are at least providing an avenue for parents. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Galloway. Any questions for her? All right. Thank you. Last person signed up to speak is Mike Griffin with the Georgia Baptist Mission Board.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for this opportunity. And we do support the bill, and there's no doubt that I think this bill has become more of a vehicle than a destination. It kind of gets us out the driveway, but it's not where we want to go yet. But there's no doubt that knowledge comes with education, and I believe this bill is education. I think it's getting the information out there that there are some concerns, and hopefully, I don't think there's any parent that if they had seen or knew what happened or about what was testified to in this committee would not be for more extensive things that need to be done in order to protect our children. But we're very thankful for this, and we appreciate your hard work on it, and we would continue to encourage you to do whatever else we can do to get us in that direction, because Jesus said if we were to cause one of these little ones to stumble, it'd be better that a millstone be hung about our neck and cast into the deepest part of the sea. And so we do need to be willing to answer to the Lord about doing all that we can as soon as we can to help our kids. Thank you so much.
Any questions for Mr. Griffin? All right, thank you. That's all who signed up to be heard on the bill. Anybody else that was wanting to be heard that we've not heard from yet? At this point, we will take a motion from the committee, and then we'll deal with any amendments. There may be some. We'll get a motion. If I have a motion, do pass. Senator Kirkpatrick. Move to pass by committee substitute. Is there a second by Senator Kirkpatrick? Is there a second? Second by Senator Kennedy. Does anybody have any amendments they want to offer? Senator Watson, do you want to offer your amendment? Okay.
So on line 40, deleting the word determination and replacing it with determine.
All right, Senator Watson has offered the amendment on line 40 of the substitute, replacing the word determination with determine. Do we have a second? Second. Any discussion on that amendment? All in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand. It passed unanimously. Senator Kirkpatrick.
Yes, I would like to add the word business to line 34 so that it would read 7 business days, just to make it clear what the timeline is.
All right, the amendment from Senator Kirkpatrick adding the word business between the word 7 and days on line 34. Do we have a second? We have a second by Senator Hatchett. Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. In favor of the amendment, it passed unanimously. Any additional amendments? Senator Watson.
Just a couple of points on line 42. Do you also put within 10 days, you do business days there too? Or, I mean, I'm just asking. This is.
If we want to be consistent, we probably should, well.
Sounds like that would be consistent.
Do we have a second? The amendment offered by Senator Watson would add the word business between 10 and days on line 42. Do we have a second? Second by Senator Kennedy. Any discussion? All those in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand. It passes unanimously. Any additional amendments? Senator Watson, you're on fire today.
Unless Senator Parent would like to, I thought the author was amenable to changing on line 25, changing from August 1st to September 1st. I mean, to me, that sounds sort of reasonable too, in that if you're getting the no later than July 1, DOE has the model policy, you're only giving them, a month to. I mean, they got to digest it, and logistically, it sounded like adding a month. I see Senator Avatarde is
the author in favor of the amendment.
Yeah, I'm in favor, and also too, someone reminded me of a good point that once the policy is adopted, it needs to be laid on the table for 30 days. So.
Okay, makes sense.
So line 25, August to September.
Senator Watson's offered an amendment on line 25 to change the word August to September. Do we have a second? Second. Second by Senator Parent. Any discussion? All those in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand. It passed unanimously. Any additional amendments? All right, at this point, we have a motion on the table. It's a motion to pass Senate Bill 226 by committee substitute as amended. We have a second as well. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. It passed unanimously. Thank you so much, once again, everybody involved for your work on this bill. You're on to rules. With that concludes our business. We will be back in at some point after Monday to start hearing House bills. Thank you so much. We're adjourned.